I Wear My Sunglasses at Night. Written by Paul Aster Cohen. Narrated by Nicky. Chapter 12. She was gassing up while the dwarf used the store's outdoor restroom, wondering if she even used the bathroom. Do I go number 1 and 2 anymore? She thought to herself as she watched the coyote stretch its legs in the nearby desert, the horizon glowing orange behind him from the oncoming sunrise. When was the last time I had even used the restroom? "You hanging in there, girlie?" the dwarf asked, adjusting his short pants. "I'm good, but it looks like it's your shift now," she answered, pointing towards the distance. Yep, he said with a stretch, his arms overhead as high as they could go. "Looks like we still got a little over a day before we hit the coast." "We should stop and get a room near the wildfires, as close as we can get. When we get there, we can figure out a plan and not just rush in and attack those things." The dwarf looked up at her, seeing his reflection in the dark lenses of her sunglasses. "You are those things now, love." "You don't have to remind me." She hung up the gas nozzle and shut the gas cap door, handing the dwarf the keys. "I know." The old Toyota sped through the desert in the blazing sun as Nicky thumped up and down in the trunk. She laid in the dark but couldn't get much sleep. The rough roads banged her up pretty bad, but things didn't hurt so much anymore. It was her stomach that was bothering her. It was growling now, roaring even. She imagined the T-Rex from Jurassic Park trying to bust out of her gut every few minutes. Her teeth had sprouted and cut her bottom lip. She tongued the wound and shut her eyes. A few hours later, the trunk of the car popped open and they were in the far end of a grocery store parking lot. It was night once more, and she was weak with hunger and in pain. Small mountains littered with hundreds of bright white wind turbines surrounded the town they stopped at. Cars were haphazardly parked all over, with families checking their tied-down luggage on SUV roofs. Cars packed with kids, belongings, and pets, all escaping the fire that was raging a few miles north. "You all right?" the dwarf asked, helping her get out. "I'll be all right." "Probably pretty hungry right about now," he said, jumping up, trying to grab the lid of the trunk to close it. "I'm actually really fucking hungry," she said, slamming the trunk closed. "And damn, it hurts pretty bad. What else can I eat? Maybe, like, a squirrel or something? A rabbit? Have you seen anything out here?" No, I don't think I have." The coyote backed away from both of them. "But I do have an idea." He walked over to the passenger side and popped open the glove compartment, producing a large hunting knife. "What are you going to do with that?" "Help you out a bit." The dwarf took a deep breath and gripped the blade of the knife. He let his breath out slowly, shut his eyes, gritted his teeth, and braced himself, preparing to slice open his hand, but he couldn't do it. He popped open one eye and looked up at her. "Damn it, girlie, I don't know if I can do it. I'm sorry, but..." Nicky yanked the knife out of his hand quickly, providing the desired assistance the dwarf needed, slicing open his palm. "Holy hell, woman!" the dwarf shouted, gripping his wrist. Nicky fell to her knees and shoved his hand to her lips and began drinking the dark liquid pouring out. The dwarf wavered and began growing nauseous. "That's pretty... gross." He put his other hand to his mouth to try to keep from letting the vomit come out and looked away. She ripped a piece of his shirt off and quickly wrapped it around his wound and fell back against the car. "Wow, that's nuts," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "How do you feel now?" the dwarf asked, trying to swallow the bile crawling up his throat, squeezing his hand hard around the makeshift bandage. "Fucking fantastic, man." She wiped her hands on her shorts and clapped her hands. "Thanks. I appreciate it. I really do." The dwarf tried to ignore the pain pulsing from his cut hand as he walked around to the passenger's side of the car. "No worries. Glad I could be of assistance." She got to her feet and looked off towards the small town sprawled out at the base of the mountain, the highway bumper to bumper with evacuees heading out of the state. They would have a clear shot since no one was heading in. "Let's roll," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. She heard a thud and looked over to find the dwarf laying halfway inside the car. Oh, damn. After a few hours, Nicky slowed the car and leaned over the steering wheel, gripped in her hands. In the distance, all she could see was a massive string of glowing fires and billows of black smoke that enveloped the entire horizon line, causing no sunlight to pass through. It was hard to even tell if it was night or day at that moment. My God, she said in amazement. It's like the entire state is on fire. Shecky laid his head on her seat and saw for himself.
I think this is close enough,
the dwarf said, trying to sound as calm as possible. Nicky pulled into the first motel they came to, got off, and entered the lobby. I need a room, she told the night manager, who was giving her a frightened stare. What? Nicky looked over at her reflection in the window and saw a disheveled, messy-haired, blood-stained girl staring back. Right, I get it. She looked over at the manager as she tried to fix her hair, sending puffs of desert dust and debris into the air. Sorry, long day. Just need one room, 2 beds, thanks. She pulled out a wad of crumpled bills and dropped them on the counter and smiled. She walked up to the dwarf standing outside of the car, staring at the blaze in the distance. Why didn't you tell me I look like shit? She asked him, smacking him on the arm harder than she wanted.
Hey, watch it,
he shouted, grabbing his arm. Sorry, I forgot about that. And I just found out that I do, in fact, have a reflection. It's not like the movies at all. Unfortunately, I found out I look like I escaped a mental institution, but that's besides the point. I never understood how vampires always managed to look so good all the time when they couldn't even look in a mirror. Next time, help a chick out and let her know if she looks like she was scraped off of an old boot, okay? The dwarf gave her a thumbs up, keeping his distance to ensure he didn't receive another shoulder punch. Nicky parked the car in front of their room, flipped open the trunk, grabbed her duffel bag, and all 3 of them filed into the room. If you need me, I'll be in the shower, Nicky said, heading straight into the bathroom and slamming the door shut. The dwarf plopped onto the nearest bed, creating a cloud of dust. The coyote pawed at his leg.
What is it, boy?
He looked over at the coyote, who was giving him puppy dog eyes.
Hungry? Yeah, me too.
He sat up.
I'll rustle up some grub. There's bound to be something nearby. Hopefully something open even with all this fire ruckus.
In the bathroom, Nicky stood at the sink, staring at herself from behind the shades. She slid them off and leaned in close to examine her new light blue eye color and new set of fangs, which she found she could grow at will. So fucking weird, she whispered to herself. She yanked off her dirty clothes and turned the shower on. She stepped through the steam and into the water, which felt different on her skin. She could feel every single drop and hear all of the tiny splashes which echoed in her ears. She could hear the dwarf thinking about food and Shecky sharing the same thought and getting excited. Crazy, she thought to herself. The dwarf was about to knock on the door and ask Nicky if she needed anything, but got a response before he could even walk up to the bathroom door. I'm good. The dwarf laughed a bit.
Hey, Shek, stay here and watch over things, okay?
Shecky whined.
It's okay, boy. Everything will be all right. I'll be right back.
He walked out and looked around before heading towards the road. The town was dark and quiet and smelled of burning pine. There had been a small cluster of vehicles leaving the area as soon as he reached the street, but other than that, it was dead. A ghost town if there ever was one. A couple of blocks down from the motel, he spotted the only blinking open sign, which was at a tavern. Pausing, he looked over further down the road but saw nothing. He stroked his gray beard and headed towards the door. Walking into the place, he found it as dark and empty as the town. There was a bar in the center of the room, providing the only light, and it smelled of stale beer and old cigarettes. Struggling a bit, he climbed up on a stool and looked around for the bartender. "Can I help you?" asked a voice, coming out of nowhere, causing him to jump. From around the glass bottles of liquor, neatly stacked behind the counter, a pale, thin man appeared. "Sorry, trick of the trade."
"Geez, bub,"
the dwarf said, grabbing his chest.
"Trying to give me a heart attack?"
"Perhaps." The dwarf studied the man that stood before him.
"You, sell grub here?"
"The best this side of Tucson," the bartender responded with a wide, toothy grin.
"I just need a couple of burgers, with fries. Lots of fries."
The man scribbled something on a notepad and disappeared back around bottles of liquor, glowing from lights displayed underneath. The dwarf examined the empty place as he tapped his fingers on the bar. The place was definitely old, probably not remodeled since the 70s. Old pictures and velvet paintings hung on the walls, mixed with wrought iron lighting fixtures and chandeliers. "Need a drink?" The dwarf jumped from his seat again, not hearing the bartender's return.
"Damn it, you gotta stop doing that, man."
The bartender grinned his toothy grin. The dwarf steadied his breath and looked over at the bottles lining the shelves.
"You know what? Give me a whiskey. I haven't had a drink in a while. On the rocks, por favor. That Spaniard for please.
The thin man ignored the phrase and poured the drink, then disappeared again. The dwarf grabbed the small glass and spun around on the stool to study the old painting some more, and thought he noticed something moving in the dark corner of the room. He blinked, squinted, then rubbed his eyes with the base of his palm, but figured it was his tired eyes playing tricks on him. He took a sip of his drink, ready to relish the cold, crisp alcohol, but spit it out in disgust.
What the?
The dwarf stared deep into the glass and saw a dark, thick substance inside. He knew the taste. He knew the smell. It was filled with blood, and he dropped it, the glass shattering into 100 little pieces beneath him. In the corner of his eye, he saw a tiny set of white circles looking at him. As he slowly turned towards them, he noticed another set, then another. The darkness was soon filled with whitish-blue reflective eyes, all looking at him. He was sitting in a black forest of wild, hungry beasts, their eyes all locked on him. The clacking of fang-filled jowls replaced the silence.
Oh, shite.